Hey everybody, just thought I'd make a few videos here, a few short videos on L'Art de la Guerre, set of Ancients rules I've been playing, and I've got a game this weekend, and I'm getting in a few practice sessions on the way there, and so I'm relatively new to the game. I got some Seleucids here going against some Polybian Romans, 100-point armies, which are your lowest size, smallest sized armies you can get in the game, so it gives you an idea of how big they are. Each one of these is a separate unit. In this case, pike units. They're basically 3 bases deep, and they can optionally be 4 in L'Art de la Guerre. This is my general's unit, elephant unit, scythe chariot unit, 3 more units of pikes, a couple Salois here that belong to the Romans that I didn't deploy yet, so they'll be over there. And we've got a bunch of units for the Romans there. They're heavy infantry. These are heavy swordsmen classed in L'Art de la Guerre. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then they got a unit of spear. And a unit of barbarians, which I think these are, medium infantry. Swordsmen. Warband. They're basically impetuous troops. So I got to keep them under control. I got the cav over here and my general back there. And 2 velites, or light infantry as they're called in this game. Up here in each of these is a separate unit. I got some light cavalry, Numidian cavalry up here. But these are all deployed except for these 2 light infantry. They're all deployed and ready to go. And basically when you deploy, all your non-light troops deploy within 3 base widths. You can see that's a base width right there, which is 40 millimeters actually, from your table edge. So they're all deployed. Now these light troops can deploy 5 from the baseline. And from the sides as well. If we look over here, the heavier troops, any non-lights, can't deploy any closer than 3 to a side edge. Now the light troops can deploy right up to the side edge, and up to 5 from the base edge. We've got some terrain going on here, and all these are legal pieces in the game for a reduced scale game. Which are actually a little bit smaller than what you'd expect in a DBA sized terrain pieces. So I actually had to make a few adjustments for that. Like these are my smaller DBA pieces. They're just right for reduced scale L'Art. But if you're using the normal 200-point game for L'Art, the terrain sizes between DBA and L'Art are pretty much the same exact sizes. But when you're playing reduced scale like this, 100-point games, the terrain reduces as well. So I can't use all my DBA terrain for this sized battle. Like, for instance, this hill right here. This hill is actually perfect for DBA, but it's too small for L'Art, at least in reduced scale. So what I have to do is I have to, like over here, I put it on top of a piece of felt, which is actually the right size for L'Art, reduced scale. And I put the hill on it, as you can see right there. Another thing about L'Art is that you can actually deploy hills as wooded hills if you wanted. And that's an option, and it doesn't take away from your terrain selection. You can feel it as a normal hill or a wooded hill. So I chose a wooded hill. So for this game, this entire perimeter of this piece of brown felt is actually hilly terrain with a wood on top of it. So that's pretty nasty stuff going on there. So that's how it works. Now I'm going to get into the details of the actual gameplay and show you how troops move, how they fight, and how you resolve shooting, all that step by step. And this will be a short little series, but I hope it helps. If you want to compare how the game plays to, say, DBA, this I hope will be a little bit helpful. But it's kind of an impromptu video, so excuse any mistakes I might make here and there, but I'll do the best I can. So if you have any questions about this series or this video, just ask me, especially about L'Art de la Guerre, and I'll do my best to answer them. So, okay, so this is the first part, my friend. That is deployment. And I guess in the next part, we're going to get right into the movement and command points, and then we'll go right into the combats and the shooting and see how that works. Okay, folks, I hope you enjoyed that, and stay tuned. There's going to be more to this little series. Thanks a lot. Right into it. First turn of the game. The attackers are the Romans, so they're going to go first. And the first thing we do during a player's turn is he takes care of his movement. After that is shooting, or both sides attempt to shoot at each other in an order determined by the active player, which in this case would be the Romans. And all the effects of that are simultaneous. At the end of shooting, any losses and routes or cohesion losses are taken into effect. After shooting is combat, and again, in the active player's choice, you resolve the combats one at a time, and all the effects of that are simultaneous. So they take effect at the end of the combat as well. After that becomes rout and pursuits are taken care of, and finally we check for victory in case somebody's won the game. And then it switches to the other player. He does the same process. So that's a turn sequence. Very simple and straightforward. It's similar to DBA. So we're starting with the Romans. Let's see what they can do. The first thing you do is the commander, who is a competent commander. In other words, he adds +1 to his CP roll. And the CP roll is the first thing you do. That's the equivalent of pips in DBX. And it stands for command points. It's basically how many units you can do things with. It usually takes 1 CP to do something with a unit. Groups usually take 1 as well, but can cost extra CP if it includes certain troop types. So let's first roll his CP and see what he gets. Now he does get a +1 on this. That'll be totaled, and then the result will be halved, rounding up. The net result is the CPs. And he rolls a 1. Horrible roll. And we have +1 to that. Total is going to be 2. Halved is 1. Rounded up, and it's going to be 1. Surprise. So what we'll do here is we'll take one of these little yellow rubies to indicate his CPs. Easy to remember, but there it is on video. Okay, so he's got 1 CP. Now, just to show you how this works, we're going to move up those velites and try and get him close to the enemy. He's only got 1 CP for his army, so we'll take care of that right off the bat. Now, the velites, which are right here, there's 2 separate units. They are a group of 1 because they're perfectly lined up. They have a normal movement rate in open terrain of 3 unit distances, otherwise called UDs or UDs. And they're going to move their maximum of 3, and that's going to cost 1 CP. So let's do that. Put my little marker there. Put it like this so it's lined up properly. That'll be 2. And they'll have 1 more, which will take them to right there. So that's the Romans' move. Now, commanders, generals, also have a free bonus CP that they can use for themselves. They can use that to rally their unit or move their unit and rally other units, I believe. But he's not going to use that right now. He's going to sit in the back, and that's going to be that. Now, one thing we need to pay attention to is there is a command radius here. In the case of light infantry, they can be as far away as, I believe, well, it depends on the commander's ability. This is a competent commander, so his normal command radius is actually 6 unit distances. But if it's light troops, like these velites, they can be twice that away. Otherwise, it's going to cost an extra CP to move them in the next turn. Now, they're well within the 12 unit distance max, so that only costs 1 CP. So that's the Romans. They're finished. There's no shooting. There's no close combat, and obviously no one has won yet. So we're going to go right to the Seleucids and see what they do. The turn shifts back over to the other player, which is the Seleucids in this case. So the first thing we do is we roll his CP, as usual. Let's see what he gets. Now he's got a brilliant commander, which gives him a +2 on the roll. And remember, we add the 2, and then we're going to divide by half, rounding up. And that's the number of CPs. He gets a nice juicy 2. +2 is a 4. Half rounded up would be 2. So he's going to have 2 CPs for the turn. Not very good, but we'll see what happens. Now we're going to take a look at this from the standpoint of groups, because he does in fact have a nice little substantial group here of troops. To move most effectively, you want to form your troops up into groups and move them for 1 CP typically. But there are exceptions to that. And one of those exceptions is unmaneuverable troops, which all of these units here are considered unmaneuverable, including the scythe chariot. Now, let's take a look at this. Now, normally mounted troops and foot troops can't be grouped together. Okay, the exception is the elephant. He is considered mounted, but he is allowed to form up with foot troops. And by the same token, he's not allowed to form up with cavalry or other mounted units. As you can understand, horses have a big fear of these big wild beasts. So you can imagine. In addition, scythe chariots have a little special rule. It's basically they can't form groups with anyone, so he can't be counted. So looking at this is a group of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units with the elephant and 4 pike blocks. So I could move these guys as a group for 1 pip, normally. However, there's going to be a problem with that because all these troops are considered unmaneuverable according to the rules. Pike blocks, they're big, unwieldy things, so they're difficult to maneuver properly. Elephants, a little bit hard to control, so they usually are going to take a little bit more effort to command to get to do what you want. Now, how that rule works is that these unmaneuverable troops, if they do not move their full distance forward, either as a group or together, it will cost an additional CP to move them. Normally it's 1. In this case, if they didn't move their full, it would cost them 2. Now that also applies, or doesn't apply, if they move into contact with the enemy. So it would only cost 1 CP in that case, as they move into contact, regardless of the distance traveled. So I think we're going to do that. We're going to spend the 1 CP to move all these guys their full distance, which has to be at the rate of the slowest member. Now the elephants move 3. The heavy foot moves 2. So we've already got a problem already because now the elephant can't move his maximum, which means that's going to cost a CP if I include him in this group. So let's go ahead and move these guys to 2. Now this includes the elephant, remember. And that'll put them all the way up here. And I can just take my CPs off, which ends the turn. Well, not necessarily ends the turn, because if you remember, commanders have their own little bonus CP that they can use on themselves and the rally troops. So let's see if we want to use that or not. So there we go. He spent his 2 command points getting these guys forward into action. Let's try and push away those velites. Yeah, so he has his extra bonus here. He's going to use that CP to basically move forward. Not much. Maybe a UD and a half, and there he goes. He's all good. So that would conclude his part of the movement part of the turn. Next would be shooting, which there is none. If these velites were within 1 unit distant range, which would be like this, for this guy, he'd be able to shoot, which is not the case. They have a range of 1 UD with javelin. So that would end shooting, and there's no melee contact, no close combat. And obviously nobody's won. So now we can go to the next turn and repeat the whole process. We're going to start off with the Romans again. So that's movement in a nutshell, and let's see what happens next, folks. Maybe we can get some troops into action here. Okay, now we're going to go to turn 2, and of course the Romans are the attackers. So once again, we start off with our CP roll. At the start of the Romans' turn, let's see what they get. Now remember, they're going to add a +1 to this roll for the general being competent. So 3 + 1 is 4. Halved is 2. So they're going to get 2 CP for the turn. Now the first thing he wants to do, one thing he definitely wants to do, is try and get his main battle line forward so they could support their velites, among other things. So yeah, he's going to do that. Now again, we're talking about a group move here. They're all heavy foot. They're going to move 2 normally. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, including the spears, that make up that group. Now, they also have this unit of impetuous medium foot, which are basically the Gauls, the little Gaul allies there. These guys right here are impetuous. Now, what that means is that, like the elephants and scythe chariots over here with the Seleucids, these guys are unmaneuverable. So they're gonna, this whole group, if they include the Gauls, are going to pay an extra CP just to be able to move forward as a group. So we got 2, and I don't want to pay that penalty right now because I've got something else up my sleeve. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave the Gauls behind, and we're just going to move forward this part of the group which is 5 units of heavy infantry, spearmen and swordsmen. And they move too in open terrain, so let's do that. And this will cost 1 CP. So we'll move the main battle line forward, just like so. The Romans are now on the move. We can get things done. These are our triarii, bringing up their right flank. As you can see, they avoided this rough terrain, which is good. It would have slowed them down. And again, we left the barbarians behind because it would cost us a little extra in CP because they are impetuous, which means they're hard to control. Okay, so that's 1 CP gone. Now we have 1 more CP, and what I want to do now is I want to move up my group of velites to get within range where they could chuck their javelins, which, as I told you before, is a range of 1 ud. So let's move them forward. They normally move 3. We don't want to move the full 3, of course. We want to move just far enough to get within range, which about 1.5 will do. Straightforward move. Nothing fancy here. And there we go. And that would be the other CP. Now, once again, the general also has his free bonus CP, and he's going to use that to move forward. He's cavalry in this case. They normally move 4 in the open. He's just going to move 1, just enough to bring himself forward a little bit. And we'll double check the range from his velites, which is a little over 6 uds away. So they could be as far as 12 before they have to pay an extra command point to do something. Okay, and that ends the Romans' movement. They've spent their CP. No contacts have been made, so we can go right into the shooting phase of the Romans' turn. And we're going to do that next. One thing I should point out here, is in case anyone's wondering why these light infantry didn't make contact, which would be a charge technically, with the elephant or the infantry here and get things going early. Well, for one thing, they're light infantry. They're armed with javelins, so they're obviously better off at shooting than they are engaging in close combat. At least that's what we assume with light infantry anyway. In the rules, these troops here, light infantry, cannot make contact, cannot charge, basically, anything but other light infantry or artillery, side chariots, as well as elephants and camps. So they could actually charge this elephant if they wanted. They could do fairly well against that elephant if they wanted to. But it isn't really a practical situation for them to get involved with because, well, we're talking about a lot of support for that elephant in the form of these pikes. It wouldn't be too healthy. And secondly, they can't charge into the pikes anyway. So yeah, that's another reason why I didn't do that. So I'm using them more like history would say they were used, and I'm going to move them up, launch their javelins, and try and slow down and break up this advance. So we'll see what happens with that. Now, let's get into the shooting. Now we get into the shooting step of the turn, which follows movement. And in this case, the Romans' turn, we have 2 units of velites that are within range and can shoot. And again, both sides actually take part in this step, just like close combat. The player whose turn it is, the Romans in this case, picks a unit to start with. He picks the order that everything is resolved in, and all the effects of the shooting are assumed to take place and take effect at the end of the shooting step. So regardless of what damage is done and when it's done, it doesn't count until the end of the shooting step. So let's take a look at this. First of all, we've got range and line of sight. Well, it's pretty obvious that these 2 units both have range and line of sight to somebody. This is their range. It's basically 1 UD, which is exactly this distance right here. And this template, by the way, is a DBA template and works exactly the same way. That is, this defines the fire arc of the shooter. You put the shooting element in the middle, and everything in this area, up to its range, can be hit. And the range would be maxed out going in this direction. So for javelins, that whole entire template is basically its area of effect. So any enemy touching this or within it can be targeted. And we know that's the case for both of these units. If we take our little template and we go like that, and we'll see that this unit first has the elephant and 2 pike units within its arc. There's within that template. Now, what happens when you got multiple targets? It always goes on the enemy unit that is directly to the front, which would be this unit. And directly to the front is the area straight ahead of its edge. So this area here within this template. So that he would have to shoot at him. Now, the second unit, we got to check this because you can end up shooting at the same target, in which case the other units targeting that same unit add up bonus to the original shooter's shooting roll. So let's check his, and we find out that this unit and this unit are both within his arc and range. And his target would be him because he's the most direct. So he's shooting at the elephant. He's shooting at this pike block. Now, we both roll dice, add an equality. And again, there's elite, mediocre, and ordinary troops. And based on their quality, that can modify your shooting die. And that also applies to close combat, which we'll see later. But both of these units, and the elephant and this unit, are all ordinary. Well, I take that back. The elephant is actually elite, so he will get a modifier to his die roll, and I'll show how that works then during shooting. But let's start here. This unit and this unit. They're both ordinary, so there's no modifiers for that. In addition, the protection is taken into account for the target. Whatever their protection rating is, and every unit in the game has a protection rating, usually from 0, 1, 2, 3. It's basically a stat in the rulebook. In the case of these pikemen, their protection stat is 1. So they're going to add a +1 to their die roll. And that's about it. The only modifiers left now are situational. And here's a list of them. Shows you right there. It's not extensive. You can see if the shooter's disordered, there's a -1. For each supporting element unit that's supplementing the fire, it's +1, max at 3, blah, blah, blah. But it's all there. In this case, there is one situational modifier, and that is light horse or light infantry shooting, which both of these are light infantry. So he is going to suffer a -1. And the target is going to get a +1 for his armor, or his protection, rather. And basically, whoever rolls highest wins. If it's the shooter, 1 cohesion hit is put on the unit. If the target wins, no damage is done. Ignore it, move on to the next shot. Simple as that, folks. The maximum damage you can do from any shooting is 1 hit, which is 1 cohesion loss. And we'll talk about that later, the loss of cohesion. So let's roll the dice and apply our modifiers. See if these velites can hurt somebody with the javelins. And the Seleucids scored a 1, +1 for protection is 2. And the Romans would get 5, -1 because they're light infantry, which goes to 4. So they're higher, so that means they hit that unit. So they caused a cohesion hit, a cohesion loss on the pikes. Now, cohesion is very important in this game. Once you max out lose all your cohesion, you're basically routed from the table. These pikes, being heavy infantry and quite sturdy, have a nice solid cohesion rating of 4. So they can take 4 hits on cohesion before they're removed from the table as routed. So they just took 1. This also makes them disordered in close combat. If you take any cohesion losses, you're considered disordered. So this little indicator here of this little dice shows that as well as the cohesion loss. And that's pretty much it. So that's the effect of that shot. Pretty good. And also, we'll go to the next unit, which again is going to be this velites going against this elephant. Look at our modifiers. This unit is elite in quality. Now, what that means, because he is elite, when he rolls his dice, if he scores a 1, 2, or 3, he's going to get a +1 on his roll. So he gets an automatic +1. If he rolls a 4 or better, however, he doesn't get that. Mediocre troops work basically the same way, except if they roll a 4+, they get a -1 to their combat or their the shooting roll. And if they're all 1 to 3, there's no modifier. So it works the same way as elites, but reversed. It's kind of interesting the way that works. I actually like that very much. So yeah, whatever his roll will be, if he rolls a 1 to 3, he's going to get a +1. So that boosts it up a little bit. His protection is 0, however, so he doesn't have a modifier for that. But the shooter, again, light infantry shooting, suffers a -1. And he's ordinary quality. So it's a straight up die roll for the Romans, -1. And the elephant is a straight up roll, but if he rolls 1 to 3, he's going to get a +1 because he's elite. And protection for him is 0. So let's roll the dice. Same situation. Ooh, and the Romans score a 6 -1 is 5. And the elephant rolls a 5. Now he doesn't get his elite quality bonus here because he rolled 4 or better. So he's a straight up 5. It's a tie score, which means the Romans didn't do any damage because you have to beat the opponent's roll. So no cohesion hits on the elephant. So that is the basics of shooting, and that's the effects of our Roman shooting in particular. So not bad. I did put a little loss on them. Okay, folks, so that's shooting. There's nothing else on the table to shoot. So we'll move on to the next part of the turn, which would be melee. Again, which there is none. So we're going to go right to the next player turn, which is going to be the defender, which is the Seleucids. So they're next. They're going to roll their command points and see how they respond to this little attack. Hopefully I'll roll pretty high. Okay, folks, let's go. We're ready to get to the Seleucids and see what they can do. All right, we're going to throw out our dice tray here, and we're going to roll their CP. Now remember, he gets a +2 for being a brilliant commander. Seleucids do have that advantage. So they got 3 + 2 is 5. Halved and rounded up would be 3. So they're going to have a total of 3 CPs for the turn. That's pretty good. Okay, let's see what they want to do. Well, the first thing we got to observe here is that these enemy velites have to be pushed back. We've got to get rid of them. So we're going to handle a little part of the evade rules here when we get to it. But the first thing we have to take into consideration here is that this group, or specifically these 2 units, have an option here of charging for free. And it's what the rules call a spontaneous charge. It's where they can charge into combat against an enemy for free. It doesn't cost an order. It doesn't cost a CP. And the reason for that is when there's an enemy within 1 UD of straight ahead, in this case for the elephant, and this pike unit, which we could see they each have a velites in front of them, means they can be subject to the spontaneous charge rule. So for free, if I want to charge them, I can do so. So in addition, an entire group, if they have any units in their group that can make that spontaneous charge, the whole group can make that spontaneous charge. So these 3 other units as well can move with these 2 if I do choose to make that spontaneous charge against his velites, which I probably will do. But in the meantime, we've got 3 CPs to spend elsewhere, not to mention the free bonus one for the general. So what else do we want to do? Well, the first thing we want to do is probably get our light cavalry and light infantry up here on the flank to get them moving. Now, they're going to be moving through some rough terrain, and normally these guys move 3, the light infantry, and these light cavalry, the light horse, move 4, or 5, sorry. But through this type of terrain, the light horse will be slowed a little bit to only 4. So what I want to do is move these 2 units, 3 rather, because the light infantry can only move 3, straight ahead up and through this rough terrain, this open field basically. So let's do that. We're going to spend our CP and move them a total of 3 straight ahead. This will be 2. And 1 more will take the group almost out of this terrain entirely, at least for the cavalry. So there they are. Moved as a group straight ahead. Now for another CP, and again, that group here was within the command distance of this guy, which is actually 16 UD because he's a brilliant commander. Normally it's 8. For light troops, it's doubled to 16. Now, so that was one CP. For another CP, I am going to move up this light horse as well. This is, I believe, medium cavalry, and they normally move 4. So we're going to move them up as well. Now, if I measure this, I'll see that my movement, if I moved 3, would take me into that terrain right there. And if we look up medium cavalry here, we'll see that their rate through rough terrain is actually 3. Normally they move 4, so because they're moving through rough, they're limited to a movement of 3 this turn. So I'll just put them straight ahead, right to the end of this thing. Again, normally they can move 4, but in this case only 3 because they entered this. So they move straight ahead. So that's 2 CPs down. And for one more CP, I could decide to move my scythe chariot. They will move, I believe, 4, is it? I believe it is 4. They can move 4 straight ahead. I don't think I want to do that. I think what I want to do is I want to kind of wheel them just a little bit, get them away from the light troops. So I'm going to wheel ever so slightly. And that was about a half UD, and then I'll move him up. Now he has to move his full, or it's going to cost me an extra CP, because he's an unmaneuverable troop type. Yes, okay, so let's move him his full distance, which is normally 4. Moved half, so we've got 3.5 left. That would take me up to here, and that would be 1, 2, 3, and my other half, a unit distance, I'm going to wheel just straight ahead. So that's his position right there. Now let's get to this charge and see what happens. Alright, first of all, we know that it's a spontaneous charge. It can be done for free. This whole group is going to do it, so they're going to be able to move their maximum distance into contact. As a group, it's an option for units that don't make contact to keep on going. We're going to have a little evade here, so I don't think there's going to be any contact at all. So next we're going to go through the evade procedure as the velites begin to get away from this big mad rush by the enemy. There is a procedure to follow for the evade, and the first thing that happens is we declare the charge direction. In this case, the charge is going to be straight ahead. There's no turns or anything. And if there was any wields or shifting before the charge, which the rules allow you to do, I would do that now. And then once that is complete, that straight line movement for the charge itself is indicated perhaps with a little ruler like I have, which indicates the direction. Just a little reminder to the opponent that, hey, if you want to evade, here's the direction I'm going, straight ahead. So I'm not going to make any special moves except straight ahead for the entire group. And I'm going to put my ruler there pointing in that direction because that's the way I'm going. Once that's decided, the next thing we determine is the evader's orientation to the enemy charge, which in this case, normally what would happen is they would about face and head in that direction. But light infantry in this case don't have to do that because they're like the only troops in the game that can about face for free. So basically the effect of that is that they can retreat facing the enemy. They can evade facing the enemy. And it's free and it doesn't cost anything. So I'm going to keep them facing in that direction. Next thing you do is to see if that evade move is going to be blocked by anything, like other units that can't interpenetrate, impassable terrain, etc. And there's special rules on how to maneuver around those units if possible. That's not the case in this situation. The next step is to check the evade move direction, which we did. If I want, I could change it. Like for instance, if the chargers were actually wheeled and we're going to charge in that direction, and that was their direction they were going, I can, as an option, instead of about facing and going in that direction with my evade, I have the option of going in the direction they're going. which would be this way. If I chose that, I would be able to maneuver to that direction and go that way. But that's not the case here because they're going straight ahead and we're facing in the same direction. So it's nothing to take into account in this case. Now the next thing to do is to roll for a change of distance that could happen here. And it's called adjusted movement distance, actually. And it's basically a little table that the evader will roll on. And it will tell him if he loses some of his normal distance of evade or adds extra movement to his evade. Now normally they move 3, so that would be his maximum that he could move normally. But if he rolls good, he'll get an extra unit distance. Or if he rolls bad, he's going to get a subtraction to it. So let's see what he gets. He rolls a 2, which is actually pretty bad. It says normal movement distance -1 UD. So normally it's 3. -1, it's 2. So he's only going 2 in that direction. And the next step is to actually carry that move out. So he would move straight forward, or in this case, for our light infantry that don't have to turn to face the direction, straight back. And they'll go 2. So let's handle that. And they're doing this as a group. And they both have the same movement rates, so it's all done at one shot. And there they are. They're done. Now, one of the drawbacks to evading is that you cannot shoot in the next shooting phase. So during the Seleucid shooting phase, these guys will not be able to shoot. Normally they would. But because they evaded, they can't. Now the next thing we do is we check and move the chargers. Now, remember, these guys move a maximum of 3, and these guys move a maximum of 2. So that's their charge distances. During a charge, it is possible for units to break apart and move even further. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to move these guys. And we do that by rolling a dice, just like we did for the evading light infantry, to see if they get a bonus to their movement distance or a reduction to their movement distance. Now, it'll be a d6. Let's see what the Seleucids get. They get a 3, which means no change to their movement distance. So all the units here will move their maximum. Now, there is an option if it's obvious you can't reach the enemy. Mounted troops can stop after moving 2 unit distances. Foot units can stop after moving 1. So even though these guys have a maximum of 2, I know I can't reach them, so I could stop after moving 1 instead of moving the full 2. The elephant, because he's mounted, his max is 3. I could stop my charge after moving at least 2 unit distance, or I could go the full distance if I want. Now, since I want these guys to kind of stay together in a group, I know I'm not going to reach them. So I'm just going to move these guys their full distance of 2, and this guy will only move his 2, which will be the minimum. So, in effect, these infantry moved their max, and the elephant just moved part of his move, his minimum, which would be 2. So let's do that. The whole group goes forward 2. Now, impetuous troops can't do that because they're so full of vigor. They have to continue all the way with their charge until contact is made or they've reached their max. So they don't have that luxury of voluntarily stopping their charge early, like these pikes and the elephant did. Now you would think that the elephant, because he didn't move his full distance forward, it would cost a CP extra. But that's something to think about, because I haven't really looked at that in the rules. I'll have to look at that. But because this is a spontaneous charge, and that elephant was part of that spontaneous charge, he doesn't have to move his full distance, and its spontaneous charge is free. I have to look into the rules on that. That might have actually cost CP to do that move, stopping early. But no, that's good enough as it is. It's a spontaneous charge. They stopped early. Their intent was to get into contact. They didn't. They pulled back. For our intents and purposes, that's good enough. And finally, he still has his CP that he can use on himself. And what he's going to do is he's just going to move a little bit forward to keep his troops in order. So he's going to go ahead too. And one thing you have to keep in mind is routes. When a unit loses its last cohesion point, it's routed, which is done at the end of that melee combat or shooting, whenever he took it. And what they do when they rout is you check immediately behind, directly behind the unit that's routing. The distance of 1 unit distance is considered the route area. Like this would be right here. If this unit routed, this space in here, any friends in there will immediately take a cohesion hit. So you don't want, in this case, I don't want my general right up behind them, at least once the melee starts, in case one of my units routes. That would be painful for me because I would take an automatic cohesion hit on my general in that case. So I don't want him right up against them. This goes up here with this unit, by the way. Another thing to keep in mind is that cohesion hits like this can be rallied. They can be removed. And that's something that is done instead of moving. So this unit, for instance, whether he's in combat or a substantial distance away from the fighting, will be able to rally. And if successful, it's a die roll. He can remove a cohesion hit. So yeah, the chance of success is based on how far away from the commander you are, as well as if you're in combat. If you're in combat in a melee, it's not so easy. I think you need a 5+. If the commander is part of that unit, it can get a +1 to the roll. So yeah, so these cohesion hits aren't permanent. They can be gotten rid of. Okay, so that's that. And at this point, we're going to go into the shooting, which we can quickly look at and see that there's nothing to shoot, because nothing is within range. And these guys evaded, so they can't shoot. So there's no shooting in this player phase. We go right to close combat. Nothing is in contact, so there is no melee. And that will end another turn, which we would end by checking the victory conditions. Obviously, nobody's got any victory conditions. Or one, I should say. So we go to the next turn, and this will go back to the Romans. And this should be turn 3, I believe. Okay, folks, let's see what happens next. What can the Romans do? Get this underway. Time for the Romans. Let's see what they can do. Of course, we're going to make our roll for our command points. So we see what we get. Remember, it's +1 for being a competent commander. Added to the die roll and then halved. Rounded up. That's going to be 5, so it's going to be a total of 3 CP for the Romans. Not bad. There. Well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to move up our infantry. They move 2 in the open, so let's get that underway. Put our little marker there. That'll put me just behind my my light infantry, so I'm not going to move the full 2 because I don't want to interpenetrate them or anything. I want them to stay where they're at and shoot their javelins. So right here is going to be fine, and we're going to be right outside of the threat zone of the enemy. And we will not provoke a spontaneous charge like we did. But unfortunately, the light infantry, unless I move them out of there, will continue to cause that spontaneous charge to apply. So that's 1 CP right there. Alright, we're going to leave the light infantry there. I'm not too concerned about the enemy charging me, because I do want to shoot them javelins at least 1 more. We can interpenetrate our heavy infantry without problem. Now, next CP, I want to move up my cavalry. It's over here on the Roman left. They move 4 normally in the open. First thing I want to do is just move a little bit forward. I don't think I want to move the full distance. Just enough to cause a little bit of concern from those lights so they don't come rushing too quickly on the Roman flank. So that's a 2nd CP. I got 1 left. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move up my allies here, my medium infantry, the Gauls. They move 3, and this is rough terrain. That doesn't slow them down, so they're still going to continue to move 3. They do good in that kind of terrain, so I'm not afraid of his chariots or anything like that, because his chariots will not do very well in this terrain. Might as well be suicide for him to rush in there with his chariots. Any cavalry, really. So there we go. I got one more CP for my commander, which he can use to move. And basically I'm just going to move forward. He moves 4 for medium cav. I'm just going to move 2. That'll put him right there, nice little central position. So that used up all my CP for the turn, nice and simple. I would like to have got my light cavalry over in the flank and come over on the left of the Seleucids' flank here. I don't like that side chariot being in the way, but regardless, now we go to the shooting. And once again, it's the same situation. Same targets. We can double check again and see what's going on. So this light infantry will be shooting at this pike block again. This light infantry will be shooting at the elephant again. So let's get out our little dice tray here and roll some dice again. Black of the Seleucids. We'll do this one first against the pikes. And let me see. First thing we got here is that the light infantry will suffer the -1 penalty, of course. Quality is ordinary for both the pikes and the velites. So it's just straight die rolls. The protection of the pikes, if you remember, was 1. So they're going to get a +1. The velites are going to get a -1. And the velites scored a total of 3. And the Seleucids scored a total of 4. One of the modifiers on here under shooting is shooter is disordered. It does not apply if the target is disordered, which this unit is because of this cohesion hit. So there was no damage done. Now we'll do the second shooting, which is this velites against these elephants. And once again, these elephants are elite. They're going to get a bonus on their die roll of +1 if they roll a 1 to 3. Any other modifiers? We got the -1 for the velites shooting. I believe that's it. So the Romans scored a 1 in total with their negative modifier. And the elephants scored a 5 plus their protection of 0. And they didn't get the bonus for the being elite because they rolled high enough. So no damage once again. So shooting is done. And at this point, that concludes the Romans' turn. There's no more shooting. And incidentally, if we look over here on the flank, because shooting is simultaneous and both sides do it, we have to keep track of the enemy as well. And he's got 2 bow units. This light horse has bows, and so does this light infantry unit. They both have bows, and the range on those is 2. So we can double check that and see that the Roman cavalry is just out of range. So they wouldn't actually fire either. So, yep, that's it, folks. Now we go back to the Seleucids, and they get to roll for their command points. Let's see what happens. Now we're ready to get to the Seleucids and see what they can do. Again, the first thing we got to do is we got to roll up their command points and see what they got. I'm running out of room here. So again, they're going to roll a d6, and he's going to be adding +2 to the roll. He gets a 1. Not very good. +2 is 3, is going to be 2 CPs after halving and rounding up. So markers there. So the first thing we want to make sure we do is let's go for it and see what happens with this melee here. We're gonna use this group here, including the elephant and all the pikes, to make a charge, a spontaneous charge, because the elephant and this unit of pikes are within 1 UD of this unit here, so they can make a spontaneous charge for free. And these guys are all a group, so I'm going to keep them as a group and have the whole thing benefit from that. So that's not going to cost me any CPs right off the bat. So I'm going to do that for sure. That'll probably chase off the velites, and we'll make contact by continuing the charge into the Roman battle line. Other than that, I might do something on the right with the light cavalry and light infantry coming out of that little field there. I do have cavalry coming up to support them. Got to get them out of there. The cavalry's slowed down to 3. Normally they move 4, so I'm going to do something there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take care of this charge. Now this is a spontaneous charge, and we're going to go through the whole evade procedure because the velites are going to have to evade, really, to survive. One of the rules in this game is that light infantry are destroyed automatically if contacted by, for example, heavy infantry. Not against elephants, however. They're actually pretty decent against elephants. They won't quick kill them, as I'd like to call it. But yeah, they're going to have to evade. So I'm not going to wheel. I'm not going to make any changes. Well, the first thing I would do, of course, is to put my little arrow marker, if that means anything. We're just going to charge straight ahead, and it'll be a flat contact. And the velites are going to evade. So again, they don't have to turn and do an about face because, you know, they have that free about face they can do for nothing. So they're going to keep their facing and just go straight back. So there's nothing preventing that. So we'll just roll on the table to see if they get any extra movement. Normally they move 3, and that tells us that they deduct 1. So they're only moving 2 to make this evade move. Now they can interpenetrate. That would take them to about here. Everybody and anybody can move through the light infantry and vice versa, so no problems there. Okay, now we do the same thing with the charging Seleucids right here. They're also going to make a roll and add or deduct an UD from their total distance. And they rolled a 4, which is no change. Now as a group they move a maximum of 2, and they're well within 2, I believe. Yeah, they're about 1.5 UDs, so they're just going to move straight ahead into contact. Nice front edge to front edge contact here. And at the end of the movement step of the turn, we will actually conform them corner to corner as prescribed in the rules, much like DBA, except you're allowed to move up to sideways up to 1 UD or wheel up to an UD, or both, in order to get that conforming proper and legal. So that was done for free because that was a spontaneous charge. Okay, now we're going to hustle this up. That's a cohesion loss. And that unit is also considered disordered because of that. Now the next thing to do, I've got 2 points here. I'm going to... I'm not going to do anything with my commander here, but I am going to mess around with this group over here. Try and get that cavalry up. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move these guys a little bit forward. Not much, just a straightforward move. I don't have to measure it. And then I want these guys, they move 3, and I want them to wheel. Get this out of the way. I want them to wheel 1 so I can get around the side. That's 1. And then I want to move, let's see, at least another one. Probably another half to here. And then I'm going to wheel the rest of my move 1/2 distance the other direction. 1/2 an UD, which is right about there. And not exactly a perfect move, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to accomplish. So he's done, and that cost 1 CP. What else can we do? I would have liked to have rallied him, but he moved already, so that can't be done. Rallying is something you do instead of moving. It is possible to move units a second time or a third time, but there are some strict requirements to that. It can cost additional CPs. I'm not going to do that right now. And just to show you what else can be done with an advance move, which is a straightforward move, there is a rule that allows you to step a slide, they call it, up to 1 unit distance to the left or right, as long as you move at least 1 UD forward. So let's do that just for the hell of it. I'm going to take that move here. He's going to move 1 forward, and with that he's also going to slide about that far. Let me get him back in the shot there. I don't think you saw that. But anyway, this side chariot moved forward 1 UD and did a slide to the right for 1 UD, which actually is free. It doesn't cost anything. As long as you're moving forward at least a minimum of 1 unit distance forward, you can slip to the side, left or right, up to 1 unit distance. And that doesn't cost any extra. That's part of the move. In fact, something unusual about side chariots is that's basically the only moves that can be made by a side chariot. So coupled with the wheel, that's about the only thing they can do. So they're pretty restricted in their choice of actions they can do. Okay, we're just going to end it there and get right to the combat. I do have a couple more CPs I could have spent. One that I rolled and one for my commander. But no. So we'll finish the movement, and what we do now is we conform units that aren't lined up perfectly. And we're going to do that. And you always line up to the unit you're mostly in, so it's usually pretty obvious. So this whole battle line is going to shift to the left. And something else that needs to be mentioned here is that the only one who actually conforms is the phasing player, which in this case is the Seleucids. So the Romans won't actually do any conforming here. It's actually the Seleucids, because they are the phasing player. They're the ones that have to do the conforming. And there is exceptions to that here and there, I believe, unless I'm thinking DBA. But it's all in the rule book, my friends, all in the rule book. So at this point, the movement comes to an end, and we go into the shooting phase. Of course, our evaders, our Romans, can't shoot. They don't have a target anyway. But there will be shooting up here. And we're going to take care of that next. Let's take a little zoom in here so we can see a little bit of the details. In this case, we have a little bit of a different situation for the shooters. Let's take a look at the light horse. Now, both of these units are armed with bows, so their range is maximum 2 UD. So first of all, let's look at the light cav. And we take this is our little template, center it on him, and that's his arc of fire. And it extends this way 2 UD, which would be about to that distance. So these guys are definitely within that area, as you can see. No other targets. Now, if we look at the light infantry here, we got to look at them right away, because they can also shoot, and they will be shooting at the same target as the light horse. So what happens here is this unit here will be the shooter. It will be shooting at the Romans. This unit here of light infantry will be supporting them. And they're going to, how that works is this guy here will have a +1 because of them helping them shoot. So it's kind of like a support in close combat in a way. If you're familiar with DBA or any of the DBX games, it's a very similar situation in how support during shooting works. So both sides will roll their dice. Let me back up here a little bit. Both sides are going to roll their dice once again, and the light horse will get a +1 for the support. Both units, all units concerned, are ordinary. So there's no modifiers for quality between the Romans and the light horse. Protection of the Romans is 0, so they're not going to get a bonus for their protection. So really the only modifier here is light horse has a -1, +1 for support. So they have no modifier, and the Romans have 0 modifiers as well. So it's just a straight up roll, I believe, unless I forgot something. So let's see. Like the Seleucids, they need to score higher. They got a 4. They scored higher. They caused a cohesion hit and disorder as well on the Romans. So there's a little bit of disruption going on. Good shooting. All right, so that's that. And nothing else is available to fire as far as I can tell. Nope, that's it. Okay, now we're going to go to the close combat, and let's see what happens between these Romans and pikes and the elephant. See what happens. The phasing player, the Seleucids, as the phasing player, they get to decide where to start and which combats to fight first. Now, it's important to note that each of these units squaring off against one another are separate combats. So it's kind of important to pick which combat you're going to fight first. It's kind of like DBX in a way, if you're familiar with that. In our case, let's start off with the elephant. He's going to fight the combat there between the elite elephant and the Roman Triarii. And we'll see how that goes. Now, both sides are going to roll dice. I'm going to apply some modifiers. If you remember, The elephant here is elite, so let's roll his dice right off the bat and see what we're going to come up with. Now, if he gets a 1 to 3, he's going to get a +1 for his quality, which is elite. Yeah, I can't get it in the thing here. 5, so he doesn't get the elite bonus. So he's at a 5 so far. Now he gets a +1 versus everybody, so that's going to be, except mounted. Mounted enemies, he gets a +2. So he's fighting foot, he's going to get a +1. So, put that right there. And in addition to that, in the first round of fighting, he's going to get a +1 for impetus. Now, he doesn't get impetus against certain troop types, like lighter troops, but he does against the spears. However, spears typically, if they receive a charge from the front, do cancel mounted troops' impetus, and the elephant's mounted. However, that excludes the elephant. That's how nasty the elephant can be. So the elephant retains his impetus bonus of +1 for the first round only. So he's at +2 right now. Now let's see what the Romans get. There's no other modifiers that apply here, by the way. And things like flank attack or certain types of terrain, or if you're disordered, or etc. I make sure I got everything here. Yeah, that's it. So basically, the Romans are going to roll their d6, and they're going to add their basic factor of +1, which is based on their unit type. Heavy spearmen, it says +2 versus light medium infantry in the open, or versus light horse. Otherwise, +1 versus all. So they'll add a +1 in this situation. They roll a 6, they get a +1 for their basic factor. In addition to that, let me see here, they are elite as well, but they rolled above 4, so they're not going to get a +1 for that. They're already high enough. Outside of that, support factors, basic factors, blah, blah, nothing else. Now, they do usually have impact against mounted enemies, which is the elephant. However, they don't get it against the elephant, if you remember. So they're not going to get impact during this initial combat here. So they're stuck with just a +1. So now we compare the rolls. We got 7 for the Seleucids going against 7 for the Romans. So we're at a tie. So the first thing you do is you compare the differences between them. It's basically a standoff. Neither side gained advantage and nothing happens, basically. One thing to note here is the fact that once units are engaged like this in melee, they're stuck like that, except for a few certain troop types and situations, like cavalry, if their opponent is slower. They can make a disengage move, and that's pretty much the only way you get out of combat. So it's pretty much all or nothing once you make contact and it has begun. Fortunately, you can attempt to rally troops engaged in melee, so that could help the longevity of a certain unit. Okay, now we're going to go to the next combat. That's done. And we'll do the same thing once again. Now in this case, let's see, we'll go here with this unit here that's disordered. So we're going to have pikes going against heavy swordsmen, or heavy infantry. So let's start off with the pikes. They are going to get a +2 right off the bat. That's their base factor. So they're going to roll their dice and add +2. They're not elite, they're just ordinary Seleucids, so 3. They're going to get a +2 as their base factor. Any other modifiers for support? There is none. Nothing for quality, as I said. There is disorder, and that is a -1. So unfortunately, they're going to drop. And it doesn't matter how many cohesion hits they've taken. If there's cohesion hits, you're disordered, period. It's just a simple -1 to the roll. And there's no flank attacks or anything like that, or terrain involved here, or presence of a general, etc. So that's the modifier, 3 + 1. The Romans will do likewise. They're going to be adding +1 as their base factor, but they do have impetus when they're charged from the front against these pikes. So they will get an additional +1. So they're going to get a total of +2. There's no other modifiers. So they're going to be at 6. And the Seleucids are going to be at 4. So they lost. Now the first thing we do is find out, well, the first thing you do is decide who's lost. And in this case, it's going to be the Seleucids. They lost. And by how much? Well, the difference here tells us. We've got 4 against 6. So they lost by 2. So if we look at our chart here, we look up the difference, it's going to result in a loss of 1 cohesion point. If you lose by 1 to 2 points, you lose 1 cohesion. If you lose by 3 or 4, you lose 2 cohesion. If you lose by 5 or 6, you lose 3 cohesion. And if the difference is 7 or more, you're routed, which is not good. So the Seleucids just took 2 more. Or 1 more, sorry. So they're at 2 cohesion loss. And their cohesion rating, I believe, is 4. So they're halfway there, my friends. Now we'll go to the next combat. And it's basically exactly the same thing. The Romans will get +2, which is impact, as well as their base factor. And the Seleucids will get +2 as well for just their base factor. They don't suffer for being disordered. So it's going to be straight up +2 on both these rolls. So the Seleucids get it. Or they lost, actually. They lost by 1, which means they take 1 cohesion loss. And you could follow along on the play sheet if you do have it, or in the rule book. The next combat, same exact thing, +2 for both sides. And we get a, Romans got a 1 + 2 is 3 against the 5 for the Seleucids. So the Romans lost this time. Now here's something interesting. They lost by 2. As you can tell by the die roll, the Romans. Now the Romans have armor. If you look through your rules, you'll see that there's 3 classifications for armor. There's no armor, there's armor, and then there's heavy armor. Well, these Romans have what's called armor. And how that works in melee is if they lose the combat, which they did, they lost by 2 in this case, they get to add a +1 to the die that was rolled. So instead of losing this combat by 2, they would have lost by 1, as you can see. So that can make a difference in a melee. A difference between how many cohesion hits you'll actually take. But in this case, it doesn't change at all because they still lost by 1 to 2 points, which is in both cases a -1 cohesion. So the Romans took a hit there. So there they go. And we got one more combat. Now in this case, same situation, except this unit is elite. This pike block is elite, so if they roll 1 to 3, they're going to get an additional +1. Otherwise, same modifiers apply. +2 for both sides, and the Seleucids will not get the extra +1 for being elite. So it's a score of 7 for the Seleucids, going against a 6 for the Romans. So the Romans lost again. And here's where that little armor kicks in. Because they lost, they get to add +1 for having better armor than the opponent. I forgot to mention that before, but what you do is you compare the armor of both opponents. The Seleucids do not have armor at all, so they're no armor. If the loser of the combat has better armor, in this case armor for the Romans, they get a 1 added to the die result, which will be the case here. So the Romans scored 6, add 1. It's actually going to be 7 against 5, 6, 7. So it's actually going to be 1 to 1, no effect. So the armor saves them there, as you can see. Pretty useful. I like that little subtle rule. And that ends the close combat. There's no more in contact, and it's as simple as that, folks. There's not much to it. After that would be, if anybody routs, they're marked as, if anyone took their last of their cohesion, they will rout, and we do that now at the end, and there isn't in this case. So we could just finish up the turn, check for victory conditions, and move to the Romans' turn. So that's melee, my friends. So I think what I'll do at this point is maybe jump ahead a couple turns or so in this game and come back and show you another situation involving the melee, and to show you how the battle's going too, because this is actually a little game going on. All right, folks, I'll be back. Had a few more turns go by, and the battle has ended. And it turned out to be a Roman victory. I think they won by, well, let's see. Let me go over the victory conditions, how you win the game. Well, usually how it works is both armies have what's called a demoralization value. And it's basically a total of the number of units in your army, basically. Each unit counts as 1. And once that total is exceeded, in unit losses, equal or exceeded, your army is demoralized and leaves the battle. It could happen to both armies in the same turn, and it's checked at the end of every player's turn. So let's count and see what we got. Let's take a look at the Romans now. Each unit that is disordered or has received any cohesion hits counts as 1 toward your DV total. So we see the Romans here with the red dice have a total of 1, 2, 3 disordered units. So that's 3 points towards their DV. Now as far as losses, if we look at the losses over here, we see the Romans have also lost 1, 2, 3, 4 units, including the Triarii. Too bad. And each one of these counts as 2 points towards your DV. So 2, 4, 6, 8. Plus the 3 disordered is 11. 11 points towards their DV. Now what is their DV? In this case it's 12. So they were 1 point away from being demoralized and having to leave the battle. But they did win. And let's take a look at the Seleucids. Now their DV for their army was only 10, a little bit less. They scored disorder here on 2 units, the pike block and these light infantry. So that's 2 points. These each count as 1 towards that DV. So that's 2. And their losses, they lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units. But the Scythe Chariot, because it's a suicidal type of unit, it's expected to get destroyed basically. Otherwise it's not doing its job. He don't count. So otherwise each of these units counts as 2. So we got 2, 4, 6, 8. Plus the 2 over here is 10. So they equaled their DV. So that ended the battle. So that ended the battle for them, and they lost. So that was it, folks. It was a really good battle. Everything was fought over in the middle here, as you'd expect. The Romans won on this side of the battle line, thanks to these impetuous barbarians here hitting the flank. They were able to kind of turn in and take out 2 of the pike blocks as well as the elephant. But over on this side, as expected, the elite pikes for the Seleucids did hold out and they took out their opponents. 2 Roman heavy infantry legion units were destroyed, actually, were routed from the table. And all that stands now is just these 2 pike blocks, some light infantry, and down here by the camp, the general for the Romans did make an attack on these light infantry, or the light horse, actually, the Seleucids. They evaded back to their camp, which they can't enter, so they stopped their evade there. So that was it, folks. It was actually pretty close, but it's a simple little battle. Considered a 100-point game. It's pretty much like DBA, flows a lot like it. There's a little bit more granular mechanics going on, which makes it more interesting, at least for me. Didn't do anything with my Numidian light horse up here, just didn't have the CP. But as you can see, the CP plays a big role in the game and how you use it. You generally don't have a heck of a lot of it, you know, depending on your commander's ability. You'd expect to get maybe 2 or 3 normally with your CP every turn. And considering all the units you have, it's not much to do anything with unless you group your units effectively. Once units get mixed up like this, those groups fall apart. You're pretty much going to be moving a lot of units one at a time, and it's a difficult prospect. But, yeah, so that's the battle, folks. I didn't want to go into too much detail with the rules, and I'm not sure if I missed up on anything. Trying to understand the rules. But again, I'm learning this as I speak. I've been playing for about 2 weeks now. Had quite a number of battles, and I got a battle coming up this weekend for my friends, and I thought I'd make this little short impromptu video series to kind of show the flow of play, demonstrate it, some of the mechanics. There's a lot more to it. Not as complicated as it might seem, at least from me describing it. I hope you enjoyed. It was a good, fun battle. It's always intense. Give L'Art de la Guerre a shot if you're into Ancients gaming or interested in it. I think it's well worth it. And if you can only imagine that normally a game would be about 200 points, played on twice as big an area. So you're looking at a battle involving maybe twice as many units, maybe 20 aside. So this is only a small type of battle. and it can get bigger if you want. So the rules are quite diverse, quite versatile. All right, folks, hope you enjoyed. And if any comments about the rules or questions, just message me, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Take care.